What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mist Podcast. I am your host, Arrow Mist, and today we're going to talk about, from a spiritual representation, we're going to completely go over energy. Now, I think energy in itself is something many, especially those in a spiritual sense, are affiliated with the understanding of what energy is. But I think where we start to get lost in translation is the teachings of how this energy is working in spiritual twinings, bindings, and many other things that involve energy's transference, as well as acknowledging the energy in itself. So what we're first going to start with, I'm actually going to bring up this little window here. If you can't see this, then I will explain it. But the visual representation is going to be a very good understanding of exactly what we're going to talk about and how we're going to go about this, right? So everything in existence from an energy particle standpoint is going to be just like a circle, right? Everything is living inside of its own electromagnetic sphere. So no matter what, there's always going to be everything in existence, whether it's at its smallest or biggest parts, is going to represent an energy particle, no matter what happens. So, like, you as an entity, as a person, you work a lot off the framework of your autonomic nervous system, out of all the things and how your body naturally functions, right? You have to consume food, break it down, do all this stuff. You know, your cells do the same thing with all of their food, right? Which is, I'm not going to go into the whole aspect of how cells work, but because this is about energy. Now, cells, that still takes into account of how your energy works, right? Because if your cells are not depleted, or they're depleted and you don't have energy, you don't feel like you have this or have that, or there's a problem with the body, and there's a problem with an organ in the body, means that there's also a problem with how the energy of the cells is going in to either help or is getting completely shunned away from helping the body. Because, I mean, the body itself is going to attempt to try to heal itself constantly, no matter what. And there can be reasons and things that we're not actually able to get that healing through, or for the body to do what it's supposed to do. But either way, the body, you live a life premised off of how the body itself also functions. Meaning that your organs, everything in your body repopulates itself the same way your cells do. So, and all of everything from the micro to the macro is exactly how energy is always working. Now, just because something is, you could almost say metaphorically representing something in a different way, then that's whenever we have a different consistency of how energy is being transferred. But it's just understanding that everything is always affiliated with something that is metaphorically representing it, regardless of what you do, right? So if this is the case, then now we can understand that every time that even the way particles or some things are going to exuberate energy, we also do the same thing, right? So if I have, like, we'll put it like this. We have this one dot, and you have dots around it. Okay, just a bunch of energy particles. And let's say that going into this right here is like the feeding system, essentially, of your exchange of energy. Now, everything to do in this entire bubble, and this is just very vague, but as an entire bubble, every aspect of what's in this circle is exactly the exchange that you have. So let's say that this one is a conversation, for instance, the top one. And the other one is going to be your food, right? One is going to be people in general. Before you even have a conversation in general, like at all. Your environment. And then there's you in the middle here. What can we put here? Thoughts. Because even your thoughts are going to put you in this exact same position. Okay, so if all of these things are energy all in themselves before they ever begin to do anything to anything else, this even includes your environment. Your environment is still a stilled place in itself until we put you into that place. And now there is this constant energetic loop between you and this. And so you will constantly live in the infinity sign of whatever it is that you reside in. And your environment seems less of a choice, as you could say, but your environment is just as much of a choice, energetically representing as a convo, as your exchange of information, right? And then, people feel like they might be enslaved by their food. Well, you're in this constant either entrapment or fluctuation of advancement between the exchange of the energy between you and your food. With people, it's the same thing with people. The same damn thing, right? Your thoughts are the same thing, right? Everything here, everything in existence, you will always have an energetic exchange with, no matter what it is. And this is because you are a constant fluctuating particle that is always putting energy out in your sphere, right? And we would say that the whole biosphere almost in itself is like an even bigger circle on top of that, right? And then other people might actually be outside this bubble, and some people get to go through and some people completely deflect away. And this is just the fundamental part. Then if you are also this intertwining energetic point of all these other parts of your existence, right? You are everything that you eat. You are everything that you talk about, you think about, your environment, the people you surround yourself with, right? So energy is always transferred, no matter what happens. There's always an exchange. And depending on where you're at in different places on this intertwining loop, will depend on exactly what you will or will not have in your reality, period. Because your thoughts are a part of what's feeding you energy. And then you're feeding that energy right back into it because you already exist with your thoughts, right? But let's also say that your food is influencing your thoughts, right? And then now everything through you is in an energetic exchange, right? And this is another thing, like, okay, so if the people you surround yourself with are influencing your conversations, then you are a passerby of this trail of energy right in the middle. And your environment is something that could be intertwined to every single thing on this entire, like all of these can interconnect. Everything can be interconnected. I could interconnect the environment. My food is based out of my environment. Well, let's get this more correct, right? How I'm like all of these just kind of goes one to one, right? Like how I'm thinking can be influenced by how I'm, the food that I'm eating. Then how I'm thinking can also be influenced by my environment. And then how my environment is can also pertain to what I am or am not going to be eating. And then that also can pertain to how I feel like I'm going to have a conversation with somebody else, right? Because you are your environment, and you are going to be then dictated upon that by the people you surround yourself with, because they're either going to accommodate to your bubble or they're not, right? The bubble of your environment. Now, your environment can be a ever-changing thing with how you maneuver. That doesn't have to necessarily be your room. And that's why some of these things are intertwined. Is like things can still have an exchange through you, and you be just a middleman point of these things instead of, right? And so we try to like dilute all these down to paint that one goes to two and that another one goes to two. The convo goes to you. The food goes to like all these things come right back in like a star. But that's not how reality is structured. Reality is geometrically structured, which means that every single facet of all of these things is going to interconnect one way or another, no matter what you do. So now when we're talking about how an exchange of energy functions, is that how you act in your environment is also going to be how you treat yourself through food, and how you then are going to think and then going to replicate off the conversation you have, and then that's the people you surround yourself with. You see where this, it's like in itself, it's this constant ever so back and forth thing, and you're the intermediary of this movement of not just energy but information, because energy is embedded with information at a consistency point, And when you are facilitating an exchange, remember everything that you do to put out, because you're already this frequency emitter. You have a antenna, essentially, where you are gathering, and your senses are always gathering. Your subconscious is gathering. You're already doing this, and that's why there's this constant expulsion. And that's why you can be directly intertwined through something like an infinity sign almost, or, in the same loop, the same gear shift, or it can just be an accumulation of multiple things that you're shifting through to make an entire system. And this is why when we understand that energy is not just, you can metaphorically exercise an idea to be black and white. And I occasionally do that sometimes, but it's because the expansion of consciousness of getting some people to be able to comprehend and understand things at a level that is more dimensionally inclined mean that there are more possibilities, there's more things to take into account to get an overview on what it is that we're trying to understand or comprehend or dilute down or articulate or whatever it might be. Then it's this constant morphing of and that's where metaphors come into play to help people understand things, and that's the only reason they need them. But if we were able to actually articulate and understand things at the base point on how they interconnect, then it seems like it's a never-ending loop for some people to go down, and they'll get extremely lost and be like, well, what the fuck's going on? This has confused the fuck out of me. To make it not as confusing, to put it very simply, is going to be more or less that everything that you do in any place that you exert energy, and that's everything inside of your being, is going to, one way or another, be a reflection then of the energy you will exchange in everything in your existence, in your reality, within your day-to-day life. And it's important to understand these things, because if you're always in an exchange, if you are always energetically exchanging, then now you have to become aware of what energy you're putting out and what energy is there in general, because that is then the loop in every single fractal dimensional way that you will experience reality upon all of its little intermediary steps of the 1 through the 9th dimension, all these other things, right? When you start to begin to stack the building of these, you are still this interwoven interconnectability. You are this interwoven entity through all of these dimensions. So even if it's still 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 2, 1 to 1, 1 to 9, 2 to 9, 3 to 5, like every single aspect of where you're going to exist, still at the overall of it, when you zoom out even more, is the whole of you phasing through it all, right? But if we're going to autonomically look at it at a black and white standpoint, which it seems to be consistent for some mindsets of explaining metaphoricism of this, then that is when you're going to only tailor in the accounting of 1 to 2 things at a time to another relevancy point. But the relevancy is that all of it's relevant, all of it's practical, and if you can be able to sit there and dissect all of it in its affiliation, then you're going to be able to get a grasping understanding of these things from a physical, material, and spiritual level. I say physical and material, but physical being the lower point of the density parts that you exist in, and this can go from the 4th dimension itself too, right? This is not just, and that's why I say material, because the material is just the eternal constant of what is existing at lower vibration. But the wovenness of the physical is a part of the 4th and 5th dimension, and that does not necessarily break out, right? Energy does not begin to disperse in a different aspectable way until you get to higher densities, and that's just because they only exist as waveforms. Essentially, the higher you go, form cannot exist, because pure energy is all that exists, and it's fluctuational points. So, and I think this conversation overall is very important, because when you're trying to get in tune, in touch, or evolve, or do anything at all when it comes to the premise of your existence, you are energy. And so this is a conversation that is important for everyone that will ever stumble upon it, because you need to know exactly what energy is doing, how it always is moving around you, and how you are influencing that, whether you realize you're posing an influence upon that energy or not. And it's very, very, very important that we understand what's going on in all these different areas. Why? Well, if you seek to understand things that are way deeper and way beyond just that, just energy, you want to understand yourself. You want to understand how to evolve, how to change, how to do something different, how to build something, how to whatever, right? You're going to have to understand the complex systems that involve being involved with pretty much anything, and understanding the basic exchange of yourself between this and all these different energy patterns and all these different proses and light spectrums of energy, then you're going to be able to have a fluctuation and a connectability into structural based things at a more cohesive manner. This is a part of the awareness of the self and the awareness of guiding the spirit, helping the spirit guide you into the places that you're trying to get to, or that you are seeking, or that you are manifesting, or whatever it is energetically that you are also trying to align yourself to, because you're always unconsciously doing this regardless. This is a thing that is already consistent with you every single day of your existence. The only difference on it is that now we have to be aware of that. And being aware that it's a part of our existence, we then have to remember that since it's in our hands, it's something that we then have to take control of, so that we can impose the appropriate type of influence. Now, I think some of these videos are really, really structured in a way that if you're seeking this information, then that is the whole point of why I'm even putting it out. Because, and once again, this comes down to energy. When you are so centered in understanding the energy patterns themselves, then you can align yourself with anything. I'm only putting this information out because I know it's going to hit ears that will not be deafened to the message. And maybe there's a couple slivers through the middle here and there. That's not like always going to be the most 1000% accurate thing. But the point is that the accuracy that I'm going to have is still going to be dependent on the energy that I put forth. And if I'm putting forth the energy appropriately that I'm attempting to, then that is just a backing intention behind a forward motion of energy in its manifestation. And that's just going to be the only practicality it exists at, because I, with the purity of my intention behind the back of that energy, have pushed it into a place where I want it to be. And that is also an important part, is that the backing of your intention, because intention is the base point of why you're even exerting the energy to begin with, is going to be the pushing force into whatever becomes where you end up at by having an energetic exchange. If you are going to exceed yourself to a solution, a resolution, or a place per se, time, whatever it might be, whatever you're building towards, or however that fluctuates for you, that's where all that comes from. And with no intention means that the exchange of energy becomes so sporadic and so outlandish, as you could say. The chaoticism of the universe is just as prevalent as the systematics of it. And sometimes the chaos is a prevalency of the systematic, but that's only relevant if, and only if, you never impose the one aspect of energy that you are capable of doing that most other creatures seemingly are not able to do so themselves, which is impose this guided, deep-rooted intention of what you want your energy to completely transform into. And I think that that's a very well practical said thing, because you don't obviously see, animals going out themselves and, creating agriculture and doing things that impose this complete change of energy and shifting and morphing it in a way that maybe sometimes does happen naturally, but that's still then a replicative point of nature. We are the manipulators of nature. And that's even from a smaller base point to the larger base point. So on whatever scale that attempts to present itself, then that's exactly how we're going to take it. So the overall point of this is that energy is in your control, and you have to be aware of everything at a base level of energy, and do not forget your fundamentals if you seek to be able to understand the structural aspects of how this is going to work and how your reality is working. Now, you may not know the geometrical, mathematical point of how everything is working around you. I myself am still trying to get into that rabbit hole specifically and really get a grasp. But aside from that depth hole, the one thing that you can begin to reference is pattern recognition, and just exactly how everything is functioning fundamentally. And fundamentally comes down from the particle aspect and the things that you are not able to perceive with your senses, but is still going on. And since we know that that's a consistency, there's still the same consistency whenever you are exerting the same type of thing just by existing. So thank you guys so much for this, for all the support, for watching, for giving suggestions, for putting any amount of energy into me, because that's why I put this energy out in general. Remember that I make music, arrowmist.xyz, if you want to check out everything I got going on. We got wraps, crystals, merch. I got all that good stuff. So thank you guys for listening. If you've stuck around week by week after this long, then I mean, I can't even thank you enough, to be honest. But I'll catch you guys in the next one. If you want to leave any suggestions, and drop them in any of my social media DMs, and they're always open. See you.